All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're going to be exploring some really profound ideas from Chapter 7 of the Bhagavad Gita. We're going to look at its fundamental explanation of reality, of consciousness, and, the invisible forces that really shape our experience. So, the text kicks things off with a pretty big challenge. What we see, what we perceive through our senses, it's not always the whole story. In fact, our senses can be pretty misleading, making us mistake what's an illusion for what's actually true.
And there's this brilliant analogy for this. Just imagine your senses are like a tiny little window. Now, you can describe the whole world based on what you see through that window, but there's just no way you can grasp the entire picture, right? And what if that view is totally misleading, kind of like seeing a mirage in the desert? Your whole understanding of reality would be built on a complete illusion.
This whole idea leads us to a core philosophical framework in the text, which splits knowledge into two totally distinct types. It's really the difference between just seeing something and truly understanding it. Okay, so first we have jnanam, which is phenomenal knowledge. Think of this as the raw data you get from your senses, your direct observation of the world. So if you're in the desert and you see what looks like water up ahead, that observation, that's jnanam. It's your perceived reality, but it might not be the actual reality. And that brings us to the other side of the coin, vijnanam, or nominal knowledge. This is the truth of how things really are, totally separate from our perception. It's the science behind the mirage, light refracting through hot air. And the key takeaway here is that our senses alone just can't get us to this deeper level of reality. So, if that's how reality works, what is it actually made of? Well, the text breaks it all down into its most basic parts. You can kind of think of it like listing the specs for a computer. You've got the hardware, and then you've got the software that runs on it. So first up is the hardware. According to the source, the entire material universe is made up of these 8 energies. You've got the 5 big physical ones, earth, water, fire, air, and ether, and then you have 3 more subtle ones, mind, intelligence, and false ego. This is basically the raw stuff of the cosmos. Now, this is where it gets really fascinating. The text makes this huge distinction. Those 8 elements, they're considered the inferior material energy. They're just inert stuff. They can't do anything on their own. The superior energy is consciousness. It's the living beings. We are the ones who interact with and manipulate and shape this material world. You could say we're the software that brings all that hardware to life. Okay, so if we're this superior conscious energy, why do we get so tangled up in illusion? Why are we stuck looking through that one tiny window? Well, the text introduces this concept called the gunas. These 3 invisible forces that are actively messing with our perception and binding us to that limited view of reality. The word guna itself is so cool because it has this double meaning. It means quality, but it also means rope. And the idea is that these 3 fundamental qualities of nature literally act like ropes, tying our consciousness down to the material world and all its illusions. This analogy just illustrates the 3 ropes perfectly. At the very bottom, you've got ignorance. That's like being an animal that doesn't even know traffic laws exist. Then you move up to passion. Here, you know the laws, you know the speed limit, but you're so driven by the desire for the thrill that you break them anyway. And finally, you have goodness. In this mode, you're the perfect driver. Calm, you know the rules, you follow them to the letter. But the real danger here is getting so comfortable just driving perfectly that you totally forget where you were even going. See? Each mode, in its own sneaky way, keeps you stuck on the road, bound by its rules. I mean, this all sounds a little bit hopeless, doesn't it? If we're all tied up by these powerful, invisible ropes, how can anyone possibly break free? Who can actually cross over this massive illusion? And the text is super clear about this. It is not easy. Overcoming these fundamental forces of nature is described as being incredibly, incredibly difficult. But it's not impossible. So, to understand the path forward, the text first shows us 4 types of people who stay trapped. These are the folks who just can't surrender to a reality beyond what they can see and touch. They're either working like crazy for purely material stuff, or they lack any real principles, or they're using their intelligence for the wrong things, or they just outright deny that there's any higher truth at all. But then, right after that, it gives us the flip side. 4 types of people who can start the journey. And look at the starting points here. It can be something as simple as being in trouble and just crying out for help, or even just wanting more money. But it also includes the naturally curious people, the ones always asking why. And finally, you have the wise, who are searching for truth just for the sake of knowing it. These are all valid entry points for crossing over. This brings us to the ultimate principle, the final piece of the whole puzzle that ties everything we've talked about together, from the material elements to the ropes of illusion, all the way to this act of surrender. So, what is the one thing holding it all together? The text offers this incredibly powerful and beautiful metaphor. All of existence in all its complexity and its diversity, it's like a string of pearls. And the ultimate source of reality, which is referred to here as Krishna, is the invisible thread that runs through every single pearl, giving the entire necklace its shape and its structure. You can admire all the individual pearls, the elements, the people, the events in your life, but without that unseen sustaining thread, it would all just fall apart into a scattered pile. This principle is what holds both the material world and consciousness itself together. And that right there brings this huge cosmic concept right back home to us. The Gita's explanation of reality is vast, but it ends with a very personal challenge. If the entire universe is held together by some invisible, sustaining principle, then it leaves us with a pretty deep question to think about. What is the invisible thread that gives your own life its shape, its meaning, and holds it all together?